The last bus left Travis Boone at a snowbound ranch he never planned to keep. His grandfather was gone, but one unfinished promise still waited inside the house. Every Thursday, an old tin of tea had been meant for a woman the whole town refused to forgive. Then Drift, Travis's German shepherd, stepped between her and the people who still called her family guilty. What began as a quiet visit uncovered stolen money, hidden water rights, and 30 years of chosen silence. But the hardest truth was not what the town had buried. It was what Travis might lose by bringing it back into the light. Tell us where you're watching from, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers and keep these stories coming. The bus had been losing passengers for 3 hours. At every small town along the Wyoming highway, someone stepped down carrying groceries, a duffel bag, or the tired impatience of a person returning somewhere familiar. By the time the driver announced Ironwood Bend, only Travis Boone and the German shepherd lying beside his boots remained. Travis looked through the fogged window. Snow covered the plateau in long, pale sheets, broken by black fence posts and clusters of lodgepole pine. The afternoon sun hung low behind thin clouds, turning the land silver at the edges. It was a bright kind of winter, clean and almost beautiful enough to make a man forget how cold it was. Almost. "End of the line for you," the driver said. Travis did not hear the first half of the sentence. He saw the man's mouth move in the rearview mirror and turned his right ear toward him. "Sorry?" "I said this is your stop." Travis nodded once. At 39, he still carried the broad shoulders and disciplined posture of the Navy, though the final mission had altered the way he occupied a room. He stood with his left side slightly guarded, his head angled so his better ear faced the world. His dark ash-brown hair had grown beyond regulation length, thick and faintly wavy beneath a gray wool cap. A short, uneven beard softened the hard line of his jaw, but did little to hide the weariness in his green-gray eyes. He wore an olive-drab combat shirt under a tobacco-brown canvas coat, the camouflage sleeves visible at his wrists. The clothes belonged to 2 different lives. The shirt remembered orders, aircraft, and salt air. The coat had belonged to his grandfather. Drift rose before Travis gave the signal. The 6-year-old German shepherd stretched in the narrow aisle, long-bodied and lean, with a cold honey-gold coat beneath a charcoal saddle. A narrow stripe of gold divided the dark fur along his spine. His left ear bore a small crescent-shaped notch, and the black mask around that eye was darker than the other, giving him a permanently watchful expression. The military had retired Drift 3 weeks before Travis separated from service. On paper, Travis was only his conditional caretaker. There were evaluations left to complete, reports to submit, and proof required that Travis could offer him a stable home. Stable. The word had followed Travis across 2 states like an accusation. He had no apartment, no family waiting, no job beyond whatever needed doing at the ranch. The only address he could provide belonged to a dead man. Outside, the bus door folded open with a sigh. The stop was not in Ironwood Bend itself. Winter routes no longer entered the town square after the county reduced service. Instead, the bus left them beside a low gas station that also served as a package depot, feed pickup, and unofficial weather office. A hand-painted sign swung above the porch. Ironwood Supply and Fuel. Last gas for 42 miles. The cold struck Travis before both boots touched the ground. Wind swept across the open plateau, carrying dry snow in low ribbons. He adjusted his cap without pressing it against the dark hearing device behind his left ear. Drift jumped down after him, landed lightly, and immediately positioned himself near Travis's left leg. The bus driver set the duffel on the packed snow. "Someone coming for you?" Travis looked toward the empty road. "Supposedly." He had not actually arranged anything. His grandfather's lawyer had sent 3 emails, 2 forms, and a phone number Travis had not called. There had been no reason to hurry. Walt Boone had already been buried. The bus pulled away, leaving diesel fumes and a widening silence. Travis watched its red taillights disappear between two white hills. For a moment, he experienced the absurd urge to run after it. Drift leaned against his leg. "I know," Travis murmured. "Not exactly a parade." The dog looked up, amber olive eyes steady. Then a bell began ringing somewhere beyond the gas station. Travis turned toward the sound and immediately chose the wrong direction. The noise bounced between the fuel tanks, the metal awning, and the snowbank along the road. With his left ear reduced to a dull field of pressure and broken tones, he could not tell whether the bell came from the highway or the pasture behind him. Drift's head snapped toward the east. A cow burst around the side of the building. It skidded on the icy road, legs scrambling beneath a heavy red-brown body. Behind it came two more, then half a dozen, their breath steaming as they crowded through a broken section of fence. The bell hung from the neck of the lead cow, clanging wildly. A woman shouted from the pasture, "Don't let them cross!" Travis dropped his duffel. His body moved before thought could catch up. Drift, wide right. The German shepherd launched across the snow. Travis stepped into the road, raising both arms to turn the first cow away from the highway. For a few seconds, the world became simple again. Movement, distance, threat, response. The old machinery in him woke without permission. Then a second bell sounded from somewhere behind his left shoulder. Travis turned too late. A black heifer rushed past him close enough that its flank struck his arm. His boots slipped, the horizon tilted sharply, and a wave of dizziness rolled through him. He dropped to one knee. The cattle blurred into brown shapes against white ground. Wind filled his right ear, swallowing the woman's voice. The damaged balance in his inner ear twisted the road sideways. Drift abandoned the outer line. The dog crossed behind the cattle and drove the heifer away from Travis, not by biting or barking, but by lowering his body and cutting the animal's path with precise, controlled movements. Then he returned to Travis's left side, pressing his shoulder against the man's thigh. A fixed point. Travis closed his eyes for one breath, then another. The world stopped moving. "I'm good," he said, though Drift had not asked. The remaining cattle were drifting toward a shallow roadside ditch where the snow crust hid a steep drop. An older cow with a white face stood nearest the edge, frightened by the others crowding behind her. Travis pointed. "Bring them around. Easy." Drift moved in a broad arc, slower now. He gave the old cow space, turning the animals without panic. Travis stepped to the opposite side, using his coat and body position to guide them toward the broken fence. The woman reached the road carrying a length of baling twine. She was in her early 60s, broad-shouldered and strong, wearing a faded green trucker cap beneath the hood of a mustard-colored barn coat. A pencil remained tucked behind her right ear despite the wind. Together, they pushed the last animal through the gap. The woman tied the gatepost to a surviving rail, then stood with both gloved hands on her hips. "You always arrive by stopping traffic?" "Only when I'm trying to make a quiet entrance." Her mouth twitched. She studied his face, then the canvas coat. "You're Walt Boone's boy." "Grandson." "I know that." She took a breath that seemed to catch somewhere beneath her ribs. "Marlene Voss." Travis recognized the name from the lawyer's emails. Marlene had been checking the Boone cattle during Walt's illness. She owned the supply store, a small ranch east of town, and, according to the lawyer, an opinion about nearly everything. She looked toward Drift. "That dog just ignored your first plan." "He improved it." "Smart dog." "Frequently inconvenient." Drift sat beside Travis, snow dusting his dark saddle. His attention remained on the cattle, but one ear angled toward Travis's breathing. Marlene noticed. She did not ask about the hearing device, or why a man his age had needed a dog to hold him upright. For that alone, Travis liked her slightly more than he intended to. The broken fence had been struck by a county snowplow earlier that morning. Marlene had come to collect veterinary supplies when the temporary repair failed. She explained all this while retrieving Travis's duffel as if she had already decided he would ride with her. "My truck's around back. I can call someone." "You can," she said, "or you can stop making winter wait on your pride." The truck smelled of feed dust, coffee, and old leather. Drift rode in the rear seat, but kept his head between the front seats, watching the road. Ironwood Bend appeared gradually. First came scattered ranch houses with steep roofs and wood piles stacked beneath covered porches. Then an old white church, a grain elevator, and a row of brick storefronts along a square bright with snow. Nothing looked abandoned. Smoke rose from chimneys. Trucks moved slowly over sanded streets. Christmas lights, never removed from the previous year, hung unlit around a hardware store window. Travis had spent childhood summers here, but memory had preserved the town in warmer colors. Dust on his boots, grasshoppers striking the porch screen, Walt calling him in before thunderstorms. Winter reduced everything to shape and distance. "How long was he sick?" Travis asked. Marlene kept both hands on the wheel. "Long enough to know it, not long enough to accept help gracefully." That sounded like Walt. "I should have been told sooner." "You were told?" The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Travis stared through the windshield. There had been messages. A voicemail from Walt he had saved without listening to the end. 2 emails from Eli Fenwick marked urgent. Travis had been overseas, then hospitalized, then transferred for evaluation. There had always been a reason to postpone the call home. Reasons were merely regrets before they ripened. Marlene glanced at him. "He didn't want you pulled from your work, said you'd come when you could." "I didn't." "No?" The honesty landed cleanly. The Boone Ranch sat 6 miles north of town, where the land rolled upward toward dark timber. The house was a 2-story structure of weathered wood, its porch half buried in snow. A long cattle barn stood behind it, and beyond that the pasture stretched toward a ridge, glowing pale gold beneath the setting sun. Marlene stopped near the porch. "I've kept the cattle fed, hired Leon Pritchard twice a week for the heavier work, but that arrangement ends when the estate court says it ends." "I'm selling." "You haven't inherited it yet." Travis looked at her. She continued. "The will still has to clear probate. There's a loan, grazing contracts, property tax, and a water rights attachment Eli says needs sorting out. You can live here. You can manage the place. You cannot sell the land or herd tomorrow morning." "I wasn't planning tomorrow morning." "You had that look." "What look?" "The one men get when they're already leaving before they've arrived." Travis opened the door. Marlene reached behind the seat and produced a square tin wrapped in brown paper. "This came in 3 weeks ago." The paper smelled faintly of black tea and orange peel. "Walt ordered it every month," she said. "My grandfather drank coffee strong enough to strip paint." "It wasn't for him." Travis waited. Marlene's gaze shifted toward the dark house. "I should have delivered it. I didn't." She offered no excuse. Travis took the tin. Inside, the ranch house held the cold more intimately than the world outside. The rooms smelled of pine boards, extinguished fire, and the faint medicinal trace of an old man's final months. Travis switched on lamps one by one. Walt's boots remained beside the kitchen door. His reading glasses lay folded on the table. A chipped blue mug sat upside down near the sink, as though he might return and complain that someone had moved it. Travis set the tea tin beside the mug. Drift walked through the room slowly, nose low. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, then returned to the kitchen instead of exploring further. Travis found the wall calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Walt had always written in block letters. Calving dates, feed deliveries, veterinary appointments, notes about fence repairs. Every Thursday carried the same instruction. Take tea to Agnes. Travis turned back 1 month. The same words. Another month. Again. He removed the calendar from its nail and carried it to the table. Beneath it was the previous year's calendar, then another, stacked flat inside a narrow cabinet. He opened one at random. Thursday after Thursday. Tea to Agnes. Some entries were 28 years old. Travis sat down. Among the rare letters Walt had mailed to him overseas, there had been one sentence Travis barely remembered. Still taking tea to Agnes every Thursday. She shouldn't have to live this way. At the time, Travis had assumed Agnes was a neighbor with bad knees or no car. He had read the line in a crowded tent between a weather report and a note about cattle prices, then forgotten it. Now the sentence seemed to have been waiting for him. On the final page of the newest calendar, 4 days before Walt entered the hospital, the handwriting changed. The letters were smaller, uneven. Thursday, take tea to Agnes. Below it. This time, tell everything. Travis read the words twice. The furnace coughed awake somewhere beneath the floor. That evening, he unpacked only what he needed. 2 shirts, socks, his shaving kit, Drift's food. Everything else remained in the duffel. He placed the estate documents on the kitchen table and wrote a short list. Call Eli, check herd, complete assessment for Drift. Arrange sale when probate clears. Simple tasks, temporary tasks. He had spent most of his adult life entering places with an exit plan. Hotels, bases, safe houses, hospital rooms. Even grief had become somewhere he intended to stay briefly. Outside, night settled blue over the snow. Travis carried his duffel toward the front hall. Drift was already there. The German shepherd sat directly before the door, not looking at Travis. His ears faced the distant lights of Ironwood Bend, visible across the fields like a small constellation beneath the ridge. Move. Drift remained still. Travis shifted the bag to his other hand. We're not going anywhere tonight. The dog looked back at him once, then returned his gaze to the town. Behind them, the tea tin rested on Walt's table. Ahead, somewhere beyond the snow, a woman named Agnes had been waiting through nearly 30 years of Thursdays. Travis did not know what Walt had failed to say. He only knew Drift had chosen a direction. And for the first time since leaving the Navy, Travis wondered whether the harder mission might not be moving forward. It might be staying long enough to hear what the silence had been trying to tell him. By Thursday morning, Travis had found 6 reasons not to deliver the tea. The north pasture fence needed 2 new posts. Snow had worked beneath the barn roof and darkened one section of rafters. A water trough had frozen solid overnight. The cattle records Marlene left on the kitchen table appeared to have been written in a private language, composed mostly of numbers, arrows, and insults directed at weather. Each task gave him somewhere to place his hands. None required him to knock on a stranger's door carrying a promise made by a dead man. Drift followed him through the chores without complaint. The German shepherd moved beside the cattle with measured confidence, his honey-gold legs cutting through the snow while the narrow stripe along his black saddle flashed whenever sunlight reached him. He did not seem troubled by the ranch, the silence, or the fact that neither of them knew whether they would still be there in 3 months. Travis envied him that. Shortly before noon, a dark green sedan climbed the ranch road and stopped beside the porch. The man who stepped out looked as if he had spent the drive rehearsing how not to appear cold. Elias Fenwick was 54, narrow-shouldered, and dressed in a gray-brown tweed coat that belonged in a courtroom more than a cattle yard. His dark blonde hair had gone silver at the temples and refused to remain combed in the wind. He carried an ox-blood leather case beneath one arm and wore the careful expression of a man who preferred problems once they had been reduced to paper. "You must be Travis." You must be the man who sent me 14 pages about a house I supposedly own." 16, Eli corrected. 2 were signature pages. They shook hands. Drift stood near Travis's left leg, studying the visitor. Eli noticed the dog, then wisely kept his hands to himself. Inside, he spread documents across Walt's kitchen table. The tea tin remained near the old blue mug, exactly where Travis had left it. He had moved nearly everything else while cleaning the room, but not those 2 objects. Eli began with the estate. Walt's will named Travis as primary beneficiary, but the ranch had not yet cleared probate. There was a remaining agricultural loan, a winter grazing agreement with 2 neighboring properties, property taxes due in March, and an attachment concerning historical water rights. "What attachment?" Travis asked. Eli adjusted his rectangular reading glasses. "An old easement and allocation agreement. It predates several changes in county law." "Does it matter?" "It matters enough that I don't want you signing anything until I understand it." "I'm not signing anything." "You told Marlene you intend to sell." "I intend to leave." "That is not legally the same thing." Travis leaned back in Walt's chair. "It usually has been." Eli looked at him over the top of the glasses, but did not ask what that meant. He explained that Travis could reside on the property, care for the livestock, and make necessary repairs. He could not sell the herd wholesale, transfer the land, or terminate the water agreement until the estate court finished its review. "How long?" "Several months, if nothing becomes complicated." "And if it does?" Eli glanced toward the stack of old calendars Travis had placed near the refrigerator. "It already has." The lawyer slid a temporary management authorization across the table. Travis signed where indicated, rotating the paper slightly so his right side faced Eli when the man spoke. Eli noticed the movement, but, like Marlene, chose not to mention it. Before leaving, he paused beside the tea tin. "Walt was very particular about Thursdays." "You knew about Agnes?" Eli's hand tightened around the handle of his case. "I knew your grandfather visited her." "That wasn't the question." "No," Eli said. "It wasn't?" For one second, Travis thought the lawyer might continue. Instead, Eli pulled at his left cuff, a nervous gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed by anyone who had not spent years watching people decide whether to tell the truth. Then he walked out into the snow. By 2 in the afternoon, Travis had split enough firewood for 3 houses. At 3, he repaired a hinge that had not needed repairing. At 4, he came into the kitchen and found Drift sitting beside the tea tin. The dog was not staring at the door this time. He was staring at Travis. "No." Drift's ears remained forward. "We don't take orders from groceries." The German shepherd lowered his head and rested his chin on top of the tin. Travis took off his gloves. "That is manipulation." The tip of Drift's tail struck the floor once. 20 minutes later, they were driving toward Ironwood Bend. The town looked brighter in daylight than it had from Marlene's truck. Sunlight reflected off the snow piled along Main Street, and warm yellow lamps glowed beneath awnings even though dusk had not yet arrived. Iron stars decorated several storefronts. Wreaths hung on doors. Somewhere nearby, a radio played an old country song through an open workshop. It should have felt cheerful. Instead, Travis noticed the pauses. People recognized Walt's truck. A man carrying feed stopped and watched it pass. 2 women outside the bakery lowered their voices. Neither expression held open hostility, but attention followed Travis through the square like a hand at the center of his back. He parked near a public water spigot mounted beside a wooden walkway. An elderly woman stood there filling a galvanized bucket. She was small, perhaps 5'2", dressed in a long navy coat and a wine-colored scarf wrapped neatly around her throat. Silver-white hair had been twisted into a low bun, though one strand had escaped near her right temple. Her back curved slightly, but her chin did not. A speckled farm dog drank from a shallow bowl near the bench, while its owner spoke with someone across the street. The woman waited until the dog finished, then poured more water into the bowl. No one thanked her. A garage door rattled open behind Travis. A stocky man in a grease-darkened work coat stepped onto the walkway. He was in his late 50s, with heavy forearms, a nose that had once been broken, and a rough salt-and-pepper beard. A welding glove hung from one pocket. His eyes went first to the bucket, then to the woman. "I told you not to use that spigot." "It belongs to the square," she replied. "It runs through my line." "And the town reimburses you." The man's jaw tightened. He took the handle from her before she could lift the bucket. Water sloshed over the rim and spread across the wooden boards. The woman held on. For a moment, neither released it. Then the man pulled harder. The bucket struck the walkway, rolled once, and spilled the rest of the water. He pushed it away with the side of his boot. The sound reached Travis strangely, metal against wood, sharp in his right ear and almost absent in the left. Drift was out of the truck before Travis had fully opened his door. The German shepherd crossed the snow without barking. He placed himself between the woman and the mechanic, body still, head level, weight balanced over all 4 feet. Not threatening, not yielding. The mechanic stopped. Travis approached from behind Drift. "That's far enough." The man looked at the camouflage sleeves beneath Travis's coat, then at the dog. "This doesn't concern you." "You made it public." "You don't know who she is." The woman bent slowly and picked up the bucket. "I know who I am, Caleb." Her voice carried no tremor. Caleb's face changed, not softened, but wounded in a place anger had guarded for years. "My parents died owing money they'd already earned," he said. "My father sold land his father cleared by hand. Don't stand there filling bowls like kindness belongs to you." The woman straightened. Pain moved through her expression, but it did not make her smaller. "What happened to your family was cruel," she said. "But suffering does not give you permission to become cruel in return." The square seemed to draw a single breath. Travis became aware of people watching from windows, doorways, and behind parked trucks. No one stepped closer. No one called Caleb away. No one addressed the woman. They spoke around her as though her name itself had become something dangerous. Caleb looked at Travis again. "You Walt Boone's grandson?" Travis did not answer. The mechanic gave a humorless laugh. "That figures." He returned to the garage and pulled the door down behind him. Only then did Drift turn toward the elderly woman. She did not reach for him. Instead, she lowered the bucket, leaving her empty hand relaxed beside her coat. Drift stepped close enough to smell her fingers. His ears softened. Her blue-gray eyes lifted to Travis. For several seconds, she studied his face with an intimacy that made him want to turn away. Then she said, "You're Travis Boone." It was not a question. Travis felt the tea tin beneath his arm. "How do you know me?" "You have Walt's eyes." "My eyes are green." "So were his before age and bad coffee turned them gray." Something almost like humor touched her mouth. Then she looked at the tin. "He sent you late." The sentence struck harder than accusation would have. "He didn't send me." "No," she said quietly. "I suppose he didn't." She picked up the bucket and began walking toward the far end of Main Street. Drift followed her. Travis remained where he was for 2 steps before realizing the dog had made the decision for both of them. The woman's cottage stood at the end of a narrow wooden lane where the town gave way to open fields. It was modest but carefully kept, with pale blue shutters, stacked firewood, and a small amber lamp glowing beneath the porch roof. Snow had been swept from the steps in a path just wide enough for one person. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon, old books, and wood heat. "My name is Agnes Whitcomb," she said as she removed her coat, "though I suspect someone has already told you what else I am." "No one's told me much of anything." That is one of Ironwood Bend's more polished forms of conversation. She wore a faded navy cardigan over a cream dress patterned with small blue flowers. A patch had been sewn carefully over the left elbow. Her fingers were thin, the joints enlarged by arthritis, but she moved with practiced independence. Travis placed the tea on the table. Agnes touched the paper wrapping without opening it. "He ordered this from Marlene every month." "She said it sat there 3 weeks." "Yes? You knew?" "Marlene avoids my end of town when she can." There was no bitterness in the statement. That made it sound older than bitterness. Agnes prepared 2 cups while Travis sat where he could see the front door with his right ear turned toward the room. Drift remained standing until she placed a folded rug near the stove. She did not call him or pat the floor. He inspected the rug, circled once, and lay down. "You understand working dogs," Travis said. "My husband did." Agnes poured the tea. The name Edwin Whitcomb emerged slowly, not as a confession, but as part of the furniture of her life. He had advised farmers and ranch families at the Ironwood Cooperative Bank. 30 years earlier, the institution collapsed after savings disappeared from dozens of accounts. A letter carrying Edwin's signature was found among the records. It appeared to authorize transfers into several agricultural companies. "He denied writing it," Agnes said. "What did investigators find?" "Not enough before he died." Edwin's truck had gone off an icy county road while the inquiry was still active. Afterward, suspicion hardened into certainty. He was dead, the money was gone, and the town needed a face for its loss. Agnes became the face that remained. She had received a life insurance payment after Edwin's death. People took that as proof she had benefited. In reality, lawyers consumed much of it. The rest paid burial expenses, bank liens, and debts accumulated during the investigation. "Why didn't you leave?" Travis asked. Agnes considered the question. "Because leaving would have looked like guilt to them." "And staying changed their minds?" "No." A faint smile crossed her face. "But it kept them from owning the road beneath my feet." The answer stayed with him. Agnes did not ask what happened to his ear. She noticed the hearing device, the angle of his chair, the way he watched her mouth when the kettle hissed, but she did not name any of it. Instead, she asked, "When did you last sleep through the night?" Travis looked at her. "That's a strange question." "It is only strange if the answer is good." He lifted the cup. "Do you ask every visitor this many questions?" "I don't have visitors." The words were simple. They did not seek pity. That made them impossible to ignore. Drift rose from the rug and crossed to her chair. He stood beside her knee but did not touch her. Agnes kept both hands around her cup. After a while, he lowered himself at her feet. Travis watched the dark head settle near the hem of her dress. Drift trusted slowly. He tolerated people who followed rules. He obeyed people who understood commands. But trust was different. Trust was where the dog chose to rest when no one required him to stay alert. Agnes glanced down. "Walt said dogs are better judges of silence than people." What did he mean? He rarely explained the things he was most certain about. Outside, daylight faded across the fields. Travis stood when the room began to darken. Agnes did not ask him to return. She wrapped the remaining tea and placed it in a cupboard beside several empty tins of the same brand. At the door, Travis noticed a wooden peg beneath the porch lamp. A second cup hook hung beside it, unused. Did he come every Thursday? For many years? Why? Agnes looked past him toward Ironwood Bend. Your grandfather believed showing up and standing beside someone were the same thing. And they weren't? No. She closed the cardigan over her chest. But showing up was not nothing. Travis stepped onto the porch. Drift remained beside Agnes until she crossed the threshold. Then he moved outside and turned back, waiting. Agnes closed the door. The bolt slid into place. Only after hearing it did Drift descend the steps. On the drive to the ranch, Travis kept the radio off. He had gone into town to deliver tea. Instead, he carried home a dead banker's name, a mechanic's grief, and the image of an old woman pouring water for animals in a place where no one would speak to her. Beside him, Drift watched the road. Travis wondered how many Thursdays Walt had spent in that cottage. He wondered how many times the old man had left without saying what Agnes needed him to say. And beneath those questions rested another, quieter one. Whether Travis had inherited more from Walt Boone than land. By the third Thursday, Agnes had stopped pretending Travis was a guest. She still objected when he entered without knocking, but she objected from the kitchen while telling him where to put the tea. She complained when he carried in firewood, then complained again when he stacked it incorrectly. According to Agnes, there was a proper way to arrange split pine so it dried evenly, did not invite mice, and did not make the porch look like a lumber yard run by a drunk. Travis moved the pile twice. The third time, Drift sat beside Agnes and watched him rebuild it. "You're enjoying this," Travis told the dog. Drift opened his mouth in a quiet pant. Agnes adjusted the wine-colored scarf at her throat. "He appreciates competent supervision." "You haven't lifted a log." "I supervised." Travis had spent years taking orders from people with stars on their shoulders. None had delivered criticism with the confidence of a 79-year-old woman holding a teacup. The routine settled around him before he recognized it as one. At dawn, he checked the cattle and broke ice from the troughs. Near noon, he worked on the barn or replaced fence staples Walt had postponed through his final winter. On Thursdays, he drove into town with tea, bread, or whatever Agnes claimed she did not need. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they sat without trying to improve the silence. Agnes never asked him to describe his last mission. She asked whether the ringing in his ear was worse before storms. She noticed when he turned his chair to hear her better and moved the kettle to his right without mentioning why. When he woke after midnight and found sleep impossible, he began remembering that her porch lamp would still be glowing beyond the dark fields. That knowledge was comforting. It also frightened him. One Tuesday morning, Travis arrived at Agnes's cottage and found her on a stepladder, clearing snow from the porch gutter. The ladder was too short. Agnes was reaching too far. One boot had slipped halfway off the top step. Travis crossed the yard before she saw him. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning the gutter." "I can see that." Then the question was unnecessary. He took hold of the ladder. Agnes looked down at him, blue-gray eyes entirely untroubled. "You could fall." "Yes, that is generally possible when using a ladder." "You're 79. And gravity remains aware of the fact. Travis waited until she climbed down, then took the tool from her hand. Agnes's expression hardened. "I did not ask you to come here and manage me." "I'm not managing you." "You took the scraper. You were one bad decision away from becoming a medical transport. And you are one good intention away from becoming unbearable." Drift, standing in the snow between them, looked from Agnes to Travis, and then deliberately sat. Travis pointed at him. "Do not take her side. He has excellent judgment. I trained him." That explains his occasional lapses. Despite himself, Travis laughed. It came out abruptly, a sound he barely recognized. Agnes looked away as if allowing him privacy from his own surprise. Later, he cleared the gutter while she stood below, holding the ladder. Neither apologized. That was how they had learned to care for each other, through argument, correction, and tasks neither admitted were acts of affection. The following afternoon, a blue-gray veterinary truck pulled into the Boone ranch. Dr. Naomi Calder stepped down, wearing a navy-quilted vest over a teal Henley, olive work pants, and waterproof boots powdered with snow. She was 46, compact and strong, with dark auburn hair twisted into a loose knot. A canvas medical bag hung from one shoulder, and a bright orange sports watch flashed at her wrist. Drift greeted her with cautious recognition rather than excitement. Naomi stopped several feet away and let him approach. "Still suspicious of professionals?" she asked. "He has standards." "So do I. Mine include owners who answer their phone." "Caretaker," Travis corrected. "For now." The words landed more heavily than Naomi intended, or perhaps exactly as heavily as she intended. She had served with the Army Veterinary Corps before establishing a clinic that covered 3 counties. The military retirement program had assigned her to complete Drift's transition evaluation, partly because she understood the difference between a former working dog and a family pet. Inside the barn, Naomi checked Drift's joints, teeth, heart, paws, and the old crescent notch in his left ear. Drift endured the examination with dignity until she pressed near his right hip, when one rear leg tightened. "Minor stiffness," she said. "Nothing alarming. Warm him up before long runs. He's retired, Travis. That means he's allowed to age." "He's 6. So are plenty of bad knees." She made notes on a tablet. "His behavioral adjustment looks good. Appetite?" "Excellent." "Sleep?" "He patrols." That wasn't the question. Travis glanced at Drift. The dog slept lightly, often waking when Travis moved through the house at night. Sometimes he followed him from room to room. Sometimes he simply remained where he could see the stairs. "He sleeps enough." Naomi raised one eyebrow. Then she turned her attention to Travis. "Any change in your balance?" "I'm not part of the evaluation." "You are his environment. That makes you part of the evaluation." Travis folded his arms. Naomi had the irritating calm of someone who had seen more stubborn men than he could reasonably compete with. She asked him to walk a straight line across the packed barn floor, turn and return. He did it without trouble. Then she dropped a metal hoof-pick behind his left shoulder. Travis turned the wrong way. The ringing in his damaged ear surged, high and metallic. Drift immediately moved against his left leg, shoulder touching Travis's knee. Naomi watched the dog, not the man. "He's compensating for you." "He's positioning?" "He's compensating." Travis said nothing. Naomi crouched beside Drift and ran one hand lightly along his shoulder. "He watches your center of gravity. When you tense before a turn, he closes the distance. When your left side loses the sound, he becomes the boundary." That's what he was trained to do. Not exactly. Travis looked at her. Naomi stood. He was trained to respond to commands, detect threats, and maintain formation. This is different. He learned this from living with you. The barn seemed quieter after that. Travis looked down at Drift. The dog's amber olive eyes remained fixed on his face. There were kinds of loyalty that came from discipline, and there were kinds born from watching someone fail in the same small way often enough to know when to catch him. Naomi closed her tablet. "The conditional placement continues. You need stable housing, routine veterinary care, and evidence you can support his retirement needs. If you sell the ranch and start moving around, the program will review whether another placement is more appropriate." "Another placement?" "That is the agreement you signed." Travis's jaw tightened. Naomi's voice softened, though not enough to become pity. "Drift deserves certainty. So do you. The difficulty is that neither of you seems comfortable admitting it." After she left, Travis worked until the sun disappeared behind the ridge. He told himself the cold was why his hands shook while fastening a hinge. The next morning, he began repairing the old equipment shed behind the barn. The roof had stopped leaking, but one wall leaned inward, and mice had turned a stack of feed sacks into nesting material. Drift spent most of the morning following scents beneath the workbench. Travis removed rusted tools, oil cans, and a broken lantern. Behind the bench lay another of Walt's calendars, its cover stained with grease. Near the final Thursday entry, Travis noticed a small triangle drawn in pencil. He had seen the same mark before. On the most recent calendar, beside the words, "This time, tell everything." At first, he assumed it was a reminder for a tool or repair. Then he noticed a triangle carved into one floorboard beneath the bench. Drift was already there, nose pressed to the seam. "Mouse?" The dog scratched once. Travis knelt and ran his hand over the wood. The plank had been lifted before. A thin gap remained along one side, dark with oil and age. He used a pry bar to raise it. The smell came first: old leather, machine grease, dust, and the sour trace of a mouse nest. Beneath the floor was a shallow compartment. Inside lay a worn leather pouch wrapped in waxed cloth. Drift sniffed the opening, sneezed, and stepped back with an expression of deep personal offense. "Outstanding investigative work," Travis said. He carried the pouch into the house. The contents were not arranged like a confession. They looked like pieces collected by a man who did not know which piece mattered. There were photocopied bank ledgers, several land maps, handwritten columns of account numbers, and copies of water right transfers bearing names Travis did not recognize. 3 agricultural companies appeared repeatedly, yet each listed an address that seemed incomplete. Walt had circled several amounts in red. Some deposits entered the cooperative bank and disappeared days later as loans. The loans were issued to businesses with no obvious land, livestock, or operating history. Beside one transaction, Walt had written, "Same money? Boone extension approved 11 days later." Travis read the note again. The ranch loan file sat in the office cabinet. He retrieved it and found the date. 11 days. The extension had saved Boone Ranch during a severe winter when Travis was 9 years old. He remembered little from that year beyond sleeping in Walt's kitchen during a blizzard and believing the ranch would always exist because his grandfather did. The last item in the pouch was an unsealed envelope. On the front, Walt had written, "Agnes." Travis sat at the table for a long time before opening it. The letter had no date. "Agnes, I have practiced saying this so many times that the words no longer sound honest, but I will write them before I lose the nerve again. When the bank failed, I believed the extension on the ranch came from the state relief fund. Later, I learned the numbers did not match. The money moved through accounts tied to the missing deposits. I should have gone to the investigators then. I did not. I told myself I was protecting the ranch hands. I told myself I was protecting Travis. He had already lost enough, and this place was the only home I knew how to give him. The truth is that I was afraid they would take the land and call me part of what happened. I let Edwin carry suspicion I knew might not belong to him. I have spent years looking for proof strong enough to excuse why I waited. There is no proof that can do that. Travis stopped reading. The room seemed to narrow around the table. Walt had not merely suspected the town was wrong. He had understood that his own survival might be connected to its loss. The old blue mug stood near the sink. The calendars lay stacked beside the wall. Every Thursday, tea to Agnes. For the first time, the ritual looked different. Not loyalty alone. Penance. Travis drove to Agnes's cottage before sunset. He did not bring tea. Agnes opened the door, looked at the leather pouch beneath his arm, and said nothing. Inside, Drift settled near the stove, but Travis remained standing. "You knew." Agnes placed her knitting in a basket. I knew some of it. He thought the ranch was saved with stolen money. He feared it had been. He knew Edwin might be innocent. Yes, and he did nothing? Agnes's eyes sharpened. He did something. It was simply not enough. Travis dropped the letter onto the table. He brought tea. He searched records. He wrote to agencies. He questioned transactions. After how long? Agnes looked toward the window. Too long. The answer made him angrier than denial would have. Why did you let him keep coming here? For a while, I didn't. She folded her hands. When Walt finally told me about the loan extension, I closed the door. For 22 months, he left the tea outside every Thursday, in rain, snow, and one windstorm that carried the tin halfway into the road. Travis could picture it too clearly. Walt placing tea on the porch, then walking back to the truck because he lacked the courage to remain. What changed? I became ill one winter. He found me because the tea from the week before was still outside. He repaired the furnace, called the doctor, and stayed in the kitchen until I could stand. So you forgave him? No. The word was quiet and exact. I allowed him back into the house. That sounds like forgiveness. It is not the same thing. Agnes rose slowly. Your grandfather wanted one brave act to repair years of fear. Life rarely offers that bargain. I did not absolve him. I also did not believe he should spend the rest of his life pretending his shame made him useless. Travis looked away. He thought of Walt's voicemail waiting unheard for weeks, of the funeral he had missed, of all the times he had called duty an explanation because regret had not yet become permanent. Agnes came closer. Walt was not a hero in this story, Travis. The words struck him with almost physical force. He was a good man who let fear defeat him for too long. Travis turned toward the door. And the tea made that acceptable? No, it made it clear that he kept returning to the place where his failure lived. Travis left without answering. The cold had deepened. Snow squeaked beneath his boots. Drift followed, but more slowly than usual, looking back once toward Agnes's porch. At the ranch, Travis placed the documents on the kitchen table and stared at them until darkness filled the windows. He had returned expecting to bury Walt, sell the land, and leave before the ranch asked anything of him. Now the land itself felt compromised. The house had been preserved by money that might have belonged to families like Caleb's. The childhood refuge Travis remembered had perhaps survived because another man's name had been allowed to rot. He went upstairs and packed his duffel. 2 shirts, medical papers, Drift's food, the folder from the retirement program. He carried the bag down to the front hall. Drift was gone from the stairs. Travis found him in the kitchen. The dog had taken the tea tin from the counter without denting it. He carried it carefully to the front door, placed it across the threshold, and lay down behind it. Travis stopped. Move. Drift rested his head between his paws. This isn't a negotiation. The dog did not blink. Travis looked at the bag in his hand, then at the tin. He could step over both. He had crossed harder boundaries, left worse places, walked away from men who had begged him not to. But Drift was not guarding the door. He was guarding the choice. Behind Travis, Walt's letter waited on the kitchen table. Beyond the door lay a road he already knew how to take. For the first time, leaving did not feel like movement. It felt like inheritance. Travis did not leave the ranch. At dawn, his duffel still stood beside the front door, packed and ready. Drift still lay behind the tea tin, one forepaw resting near it, as though guarding evidence in a trial no one else could see. Travis stared at both for a long time. Then he carried the bag upstairs. He did not unpack it. That distinction mattered to him more than it should have. Staying was not forgiveness, it was not loyalty to Walt, and it certainly was not an agreement to inherit the old man's excuses. Travis stayed because walking away would make silence the only thing passed cleanly from one Boone generation to the next. He could not change what Walt had failed to do. He could decide what happened to the failure. By mid-morning, Travis had spread the contents of the leather pouch across the kitchen table. He arranged the ledgers by date, the land maps by county parcel, and the water right transfers by company name. Years of military planning had taught him how to build order from fragments. What it had not taught him was how to read 30-year-old cooperative bank accounting. 3 companies appeared again and again: Lark Basin Cattle, LLC, High Mesa Agricultural Services, Prairie Belle Livestock Holdings. Each received loans large enough to purchase land or herds. None appeared in Walt's notes as owning either. Beside one address, Walt had written, "Ask Lenora. She remembers the box number." The Ironwood Bend Library occupied the former railroad office at the north end of Main Street. Its red brick walls were dark with age, and snow rested along the windowsills in clean white bands. Inside, the building smelled of paper, floor wax, and radiator heat. A brass bell sounded when Travis entered. Drift followed at his left side. The woman behind the circulation desk looked up from a stack of index cards. Lenora Pike was 67 and thin enough that her long chestnut cardigan seemed to hang from her shoulders. Her ash-gray hair formed a precise bob at her jaw. Hexagonal glasses with brass-colored frames sharpened an already careful face. Her eyes moved from Travis to Drift, then to the leather pouch under his arm. "You are Walt's grandson," she said. Travis had begun to suspect the entire town knew him before he knew anyone. "Travis Boone." "I know." Lenora placed her pen beside the cards. Unlike Agnes, she did not say he had Walt's eyes. She looked at him as if measuring the distance between a question and the damage it might cause. "I need help identifying some old bank records." The silence that followed was small but immediate. Lenora glanced toward the reading room. 2 men sat near the radiator with newspapers open. Neither appeared to be listening, which meant both probably were. "We do not provide financial advice," she said. "I'm not asking for advice." "Then perhaps you should speak to Mr. Fenwick. Walt wrote your name." That changed her, not dramatically. Her shoulders remained still, her expression controlled. But the fingers of her right hand closed over the edge of the desk. What exactly did he write? "That you remembered a post office box." Lenora looked again toward the reading room. Then she lifted a chain of small brass keys from her wrist. "The archive closes to the public at 4. "It's 11. "Yes," she said. "How fortunate you arrived before closing." She led Travis through a door behind the desk and down a narrow staircase. The basement archive was colder than the library above. Shelves filled the room from floor to ceiling, holding bound newspapers, property maps, town council minutes, business licenses, and cardboard boxes marked by year. A green-shaded lamp illuminated a work table at the center. Lenora closed the door. Only then did she ask to see the records. Travis laid out copies of the 3 loan files. Lenora did not touch them immediately. She put on white cotton gloves, adjusted the lamp, and studied the first page. Her breathing changed when she reached the address. P.O. Box 184. "You remember it?" "I remember typing it." Her voice had become quieter. Lenora pulled out a chair but did not sit. "In 1996, I was 27 and newly certified in bookkeeping. The cooperative bank hired me to reconcile daily balances. I believed accounting was honest work because numbers did not care who your father was or where you went to church." She gave a dry, almost embarrassed laugh. "I was very young." She explained that her position lasted 9 months. Senior employees prepared most of the supporting documents. Lenora checked totals, confirmed that deposits matched outgoing transfers, and signed balance sheets placed before her. Did you see the original loan applications? Rarely, but you signed them. I signed summaries stating that the numbers reconciled. Did they? On the pages I was given. There was no self-defense in her tone. That made the admission heavier. When the bank collapsed, investigators questioned every employee. Lenora had not stolen money, altered records, or received any benefit. She was never charged. That distinction did not preserve her career. No regional bank wanted an accountant whose signature appeared on failed ledgers. She left finance, returned to college in her 30s, and eventually became Ironwood Bend's librarian. "I thought books might be safer than money," she said. Were they? No, people hide things in both. She finally sat. Box 184 belonged to a rural mail service account. Several businesses used it. Which businesses? Lenora looked at the 3 company names. All of them. The answer seemed too simple. Travis placed a county map on the table. Who rented the box? I never knew. Bills came through internal mail. But I remember a return address stamped on several envelopes. A real estate office in Casper. Name? Rusk Land and Title. The surname settled between them. Travis knew it from roadside signs and the bronze plaque outside Town Hall. Gideon Rusk, Mayor. Lenora removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Gideon's uncle, Orson Rusk, owned the company. Gideon was a junior administrative assistant at the cooperative bank then. Did investigators know? They knew the box connected the businesses. They said shared mailboxes were common for rural companies. 3 companies with no cattle using the same box to borrow money for cattle. Lenora's mouth tightened. That was not the only thing they said was common. She stood abruptly and crossed to a row of metal map drawers. From one, she removed several rolled plats tied with cotton tape. From another, she brought old business registrations and bound county notices. For the next 2 hours, they followed names through time. Lark Basin Cattle received a loan, then purchased water shares from a failing ranch west of town. High Mesa Agricultural Services bought an easement over land it never developed. Prairie Belle Livestock acquired seasonal diversion rights along a creek feeding Ironwood Bend's northern pasture lands. Within 5 years, all 3 companies dissolved. Their assets did not disappear. They transferred first to Rusk Land and Title, then to a private trust called North Star Holdings. Travis traced the sequence with one finger. Who owns North Star? Lenora opened a current county filing. The beneficiary is not public. Trustee? A law office in Cheyenne. That convenient? It is expensive, Lenora replied. Convenience is usually cheaper. Drift rested beneath the table, chin on his paws. His eyes followed Travis whenever he leaned closer to the records. Lenora found another document. A recent zoning application bearing a photograph of a planned winter resort. Glass lodges, ski trails, heated pools, and an artificial lake cut into the White Plateau. The developer was Iron Crest Leisure Group. North Star Holdings had pledged historical water rights as security for the project. Travis looked at the map again. The proposed diversion corridor crossed the same watershed used by Boone Ranch, Marlene's property, and more than a dozen smaller operations. What happens to those ranches? The application says existing users will not be materially affected. That isn't an answer. No. Lenora folded her gloves carefully. In dry years, senior water rights control who receives water first. Some of these old rights may outrank newer ranch allocations. So the resort fills a lake while cattle troughs go dry? If the documents survive legal challenge. Travis studied the development filing. At the bottom was the signature of the mayor and chairman of the County Economic Committee, Gideon Rusk. The past had not remained buried. It had acquired architects. Lenora gathered the papers too quickly. That is enough for today. We just found a connection. We found a pattern. Patterns are where investigations start. And panic is where towns end. Her voice rose for the first time. She removed her glasses and faced him fully. You think this is about Walt, Agnes, and a dead man's name? It is not. The Winter Relief Fund purchases feed, propane, and emergency veterinary supplies for half the small ranches in this valley. Gideon chairs the board. His office negotiates the supply contracts. What does that have to do with these records? If you accuse him without proof and the fund freezes, people lose cattle before anyone decides whether you were right. You're afraid he'll retaliate. I am afraid consequences do not wait for moral clarity. Lenora turned toward the shelves. Walt understood that. The words struck precisely where she intended. Travis stepped back from the table. Walt used consequences to justify 30 years of delay. And you may use anger to justify moving too quickly. Neither spoke. Drift lifted his head, but did not rise. At last, Travis said, I'm not trying to clear Walt. Lenora looked at him. I'm trying to keep his silence from becoming mine. Something in her expression shifted, not trust, but recognition. She returned to the table and wrote a telephone number on an index card. Malcolm Reeve, former federal financial analyst. He reviewed the cooperative bank file after it was closed. Why wasn't that in Walt's notes? It was. He wrote MR because Malcolm asked him not to use the full name. Will he talk to me? No. Travis waited. Lenora handed him the card. But he may listen long enough to refuse. Malcolm Reeve answered on the fourth call. His voice was thin but sharp, with the clipped patience of someone accustomed to separating useful facts from human enthusiasm. Travis explained who he was. Malcolm interrupted 3 times. What is the case number? Travis read it from Lenora's file. Source of the documents? Copies collected by Walter Boone. Chain of custody? Unknown. Originals? Unknown. Consent from Edwin Whitcomb's surviving spouse? Not yet. Then you have an old man's folder and a family suspicion. I have 3 companies sharing one mailbox and transferring water rights into a trust connected to a current resort project. The line went quiet. Not long. Just enough. Malcolm asked for scans. He did not promise to call back. 3 days passed. During that time, Travis returned to the library. Lenora helped him copy business registrations, archive tax notices, and public water filings. She spoke little while they worked. When mistakes appeared in old records bearing her signature, she did not look away from them. Agnes signed a written statement authorizing Malcolm to review material connected to Edwin's case. She read the form twice before signing. Do you trust him? Travis asked. No? Then why agree? Trust is not required for every necessary thing. On the 4th morning, Malcolm called. 2 of the dissolved companies are still alive. Travis straightened at the kitchen table. They were dissolved. The names were. Their tax identities were absorbed through successor entities. North Star Holdings owned shares in Ironcrest Leisure Group through a management subsidiary. You found all that in 3 days? I found enough to become annoyed. Malcolm requested copies of the original Walt notes, Agnes's authorization, the current water right pledge, and the Winter Relief Fund's most recent public filings. Why the Relief Fund? Because one of its feed suppliers uses the same registered agent as Ironcrest. Travis looked toward Drift. The dog was lying beneath the window, sunlight falling across the gold stripe along his back. When can you come to Wyoming? I did not say I was coming. No, you only found a 30-year-old financial structure still operating. Another silence. Then Malcolm sighed. I dislike winter. You'll fit in. Malcolm arrived 2 days later in a gray sedan covered with road salt. At 74, he remained tall, though one shoulder sat lower and he favored his right knee when walking. His white hair was cut close, and a neatly trimmed gray beard framed a face made severe by a narrow nose and pale blue eyes. He carried a worn cognac leather case and wore a field coat the color of old sage. He greeted Travis with a nod. He greeted Drift with the same respect. Working partner? Retired. So are we all, apparently. The meeting took place at Agnes's cottage. Malcolm declined tea twice before accepting it on the third offer, perhaps realizing refusal had become more disruptive than surrender. Agnes sat opposite him. For several minutes they discussed documents rather than history. Malcolm explained which transactions could be traced, which were speculative, and which required records they might never obtain. Agnes listened without interruption. Finally she asked, Did you read Edwin's file 30 years ago? Yes. Did you believe he stole the money? Malcolm removed his glasses. I believed the evidence against him was incomplete. That is not what I asked. His pale eyes lowered. No. The room held still. Drift rose from beside the stove and crossed between them. He rested his head briefly on Malcolm's knee, then moved to Agnes and placed his muzzle against her skirt. Malcolm looked at the dog. I recommended reopening the review, he said. My supervisor said there were no originals, no cooperative witnesses, and no living suspect worth the expense. You accepted that. I objected once. Once? Yes. Malcolm's voice did not defend itself. I saw a door. I pushed. It did not open. I told myself that meant it was locked. Agnes wrapped both hands around her cup. And now? Now I think I stopped pushing because I was relieved not to know what stood behind it. He did not ask forgiveness. Agnes did not offer it. That honesty created more room between them than apology might have. Malcolm spent the afternoon reviewing Walt's notes with Lenora and Travis. By evening, he had separated the material into 3 piles. The first contained facts supported by public records. The second contained plausible connections requiring verification. The third contained Walt's suspicions, memories, and conclusions. This pile, Malcolm said, tapping the third, may be emotionally true and legally useless. Travis looked at the first pile. Is there enough to clear Edwin? No. Agnes's face did not change. Enough to prosecute what happened 30 years ago? Probably not. Statutes have expired. Records are missing. Witnesses are dead. He placed one hand on the current resort filing. But these transactions are not dead. The pledged water rights were active. The resort financing was current. The relief funds still issued contracts. Companies linked to old shell entities continued receiving money. Malcolm tapped the page once. The past may be beyond prosecution. The present is not. Outside, snow began falling over Ironwood Bend, soft and bright beneath the porch lamp. Travis looked at Walt's old notes, then at the new filings beside them. He had begun by asking whether a dead man had been wrongly accused. Now a different question stood before him. How many living people were still being made dependent on the same lie? The storm arrived before the town finished preparing for it. By sunrise, the highway south of Ironwood Bend had vanished beneath blowing snow. County crews closed the pass after a plow slid into a drainage ditch, and the radio warned that wind speeds across the plateau could make travel impossible by afternoon. At Boone Ranch, snow moved sideways past the kitchen windows. Travis stood over the weather report with one hand braced on the table. Drift waited beside him in a charcoal working harness, an amber locator light fastened near his right shoulder. The cattle had enough hay for 5 days. Marlene's latest inventory showed that several smaller ranches had less than 2. By 8, the first call came. A propane delivery for an elderly ranching couple had been canceled at the county line. 20 minutes later, Naomi reported a pneumonia outbreak among calves east of town. Before 9, Marlene called to say the Winter Relief Board had released its emergency distribution list. Boone Ranch was not on it. Neither were 8 other properties whose owners had questioned the resort proposal. Travis drove to town before the road disappeared completely. The relief board had gathered in the municipal meeting room above the fire station. Gideon Rusk stood at the head of the table in a navy overcoat, every trace of snow already brushed from his shoulders. At 61, he carried extra weight around the middle, but moved with polished confidence. His silver-gray hair remained perfectly parted, and his open expression suggested that any disagreement with him was merely a misunderstanding waiting to be corrected. 4 board members sat before him. 1 chair remained empty. A brass plate identified it as the seat for the small ranch representative. Walt Boone's seat. Marlene stood near the back wall in her faded green trucker cap, a red leather ledger tucked beneath one arm. "I nominate Travis Boone as temporary representative," she said. Gideon smiled before Travis could respond. "The bylaws require a permanent resident with 6 months of documented agricultural management." "The man inherited the ranch," Marlene replied. "He has not completed probate. He's feeding the cattle, which is not the same as holding legal title." Gideon's tone never sharpened. He did not need it to. Travis looked at the distribution list. The approved ranches had one thing in common. Their owners had signed letters supporting Ironcrest's winter resort. "You're using emergency feed as a voting tool," Travis said. Gideon folded his hands. "I am prioritizing established operations whose records are current and whose cooperation allows the town to coordinate efficiently." Cooperation with what? With Ironwood Bend's economic future. The 2 board members seated nearest him avoided Travis's eyes. One owned the trucking company contracted to haul relief feed. The other leased equipment from a firm connected to the resort developer. Gideon turned toward Travis with practiced concern. "You have military experience, Mr. Boone. You understand that emergencies require discipline, not improvised command." Travis had heard men use that language before, discipline when they meant obedience, unity when they meant silence. He glanced at Walt's empty chair. Then he stepped away from the table. Gideon mistook the movement for surrender. It was not. By noon, Marlene had opened her private feed warehouse. She placed the red ledger on a folding table near the entrance and wrote every outgoing sack, bale, and gallon of fuel in block letters large enough for anyone to read. "No favors," she announced. "No secret lists. Worst need first." Lenora established a temporary coordination desk in the library's main room. She used county maps, veterinary reports, and handwritten phone calls to rank emergencies. Eli reviewed liability forms and drafted a simple mutual aid agreement protecting volunteers who transported supplies. Naomi converted the rear of her veterinary truck into a mobile treatment station. Agnes turned her cottage into a kitchen. By early afternoon, steam clouded her windows. Pots of stew covered the stove. Biscuits cooled beneath towels. A row of thermoses stood beside tins of tea. Agnes directed everyone from the center of the room with the authority of someone who had survived 30 years without a committee. Caleb Dern arrived carrying a toolbox, saw Agnes at the stove, and stopped in the doorway. "I was told the generator crew was meeting here." "It is," Agnes said. Caleb looked at Travis. "Find another location." "The generator is failing at the Leland place," Travis replied. "They have 2 oxygen concentrators and no backup heat." "I'll fix it. I'm not working out of her house." Agnes continued cutting bread. No one asked you to admire the wallpaper. Caleb's jaw tightened. The wind rattled the windows. Travis stepped between them, not as a shield, but as a boundary. You can dislike her after the generator is running. Caleb stared at Agnes for several seconds. Then he set his toolbox down hard enough to shake the cups. Agnes handed him a thermos. He did not take it. "You'll freeze before you reach the ridge," she said. "I brought coffee." "That substance in your truck has not been coffee since Tuesday." Marlene coughed to hide a laugh. Caleb took the thermos. The emergency network grew because it had to. Ranchers who had not spoken in years shared chains, fuel cans, and livestock trailers. Lenora kept names and needs visible on a board so no one could quietly move a friend ahead of a stranger. Eli drove between properties collecting signatures and discovered that legal language looked much less impressive while kneeling in snow beside a stalled truck. Travis coordinated routes without calling himself a leader. He knew how to divide terrain, estimate travel time, and match people to tasks. But the work differed from any operation he had known. No one saluted. Half the volunteers ignored instructions until Marlene repeated them more loudly. Agnes changed 2 delivery routes because she knew which households would lie about needing food. Drift moved through it all with quiet purpose. He watched Travis, but he also began checking Agnes whenever the cottage door opened. If someone entered too quickly, Drift shifted between them without aggression. If Agnes crossed the icy porch, he walked at her slower pace. Late that afternoon, Caleb and Travis reached the Leland Ranch. The generator sat in an open shed, coughing black smoke. Caleb removed the housing and worked by flashlight while Travis cleared the exhaust line. Inside the house, the mechanical hum of oxygen equipment weakened with every failed ignition. Caleb's hands remained steady. "My father could fix anything with an engine," he said without looking up. Travis passed him a wrench. "He taught you?" "He taught me after we lost the ranch." Said a man without land should learn to repair what landowners break. The bitterness was still there, but it no longer pointed entirely at Agnes. Caleb tightened a connection. "When the bank failed, my mother waited by the mailbox for a refund that never came. Every week she said maybe this time somebody would explain. The generator turned once and died." Caleb struck the casing with the heel of his hand. "I spent 30 years believing her husband took the answer with him. And now? I don't know what to believe." The generator caught on the next attempt. Lights returned inside the house. Caleb sat back in the snow, breathing hard. Travis offered him Agnes's thermos. This time, Caleb drank. Night came early, but the calls did not stop. Naomi needed antibiotics delivered to a ranch north of Miller Creek. A fuel canister had to reach a stranded livestock hauler on the county road. Travis loaded the supplies onto a small utility sled behind the ranch snowmobile. The storm had thickened. Marlene stood beneath the warehouse awning, wind snapping at her coat. "You should wait." "The calves won't." "You won't help them if you drive off the road." Travis checked Drift's beacon. "We know the route." Marlene looked at the dog. "That makes one of you." For the first mile, the fence line remained visible. Then the plateau disappeared. Snow filled the air in every direction, erasing ground from sky. The snowmobile's headlight reflected back into Travis's face, turning the storm into a white wall. Wind battered the right side of his hood, producing a constant roar in his better ear. Somewhere ahead, a sleigh bell sounded. Travis slowed. The sound seemed to come from the left, then behind him, then nowhere. His tinnitus rose until it became a thin metallic scream inside his skull. He searched for the marker posts along Miller Creek. There were none. The snowmobile tilted beneath him, or the horizon did. His damaged balance system could no longer decide. Travis stopped the machine and put one boot down. The ground appeared to move beneath it. His stomach tightened. When he tried to stand, the plateau rolled sideways. Drift jumped from the rear platform. The dog pressed hard against Travis's left leg. Travis gripped the seat. "I'm fine." Drift leaned harder. The bell sounded again, faint and directionless. Travis tried to step away. Drift moved across his path and held position, forcing him to remain beside the machine. Not now, Travis thought. He had medicine in the cargo box. People were waiting. Cattle were sick. Being useful had always been the simplest way to avoid being afraid. But Drift did not care what Travis intended to prove. The dog waited until his breathing slowed. Then Drift turned away from the marked route. Creek is north. Drift looked back once and began moving southwest. Travis checked the compass. The needle trembled in the wind. Southwest led toward Ironwood Bend, toward Agnes. The ranch delivery would have to wait for another crew. Travis radioed Marlene, but static swallowed most of his words. He managed to report the failed route and his approximate position. Then he followed Drift. They moved slowly, the snowmobile trailing behind the dog's amber beacon. Drift paused often to confirm Travis remained upright. He followed no visible road, only the remembered line of fences buried beneath snow and the scent corridors protected by low ground. After 40 minutes, a warm point of light appeared in the white. Not the town. A single porch lamp. Agnes stood in the doorway when they reached the cottage. She wore her faded navy cardigan beneath a heavy coat, wine-colored scarf wrapped over her silver hair. She did not ask why Travis had come from the wrong direction or why his hands shook while removing his gloves. She took the medicine box from him and handed it to Naomi, who had arrived minutes earlier after Marlene redirected another driver to Miller Creek. Then Agnes looked at Travis. "Sit down before you fall down and damage my floor." He almost laughed. Instead, he sat. Drift lay against his left boot, body warm and solid. Agnes placed a cup in front of him, but did not fill the silence. Outside, wind pushed snow against the windows. Inside, the stove burned steadily. "I thought I could make it," Travis said at last. Agnes folded a towel. "That is often what people say immediately before proving otherwise. I knew the route. You knew it in good weather." He stared into the tea. "I don't know how to do this." "Drive in a blizzard?" "Stay." Agnes stopped folding. Travis kept his eyes on the cup. "Every place I've belonged to had an end date. Orders changed. Teams broke apart. People died. My parents were gone before I understood what losing them meant. Walt died while I was somewhere else pretending there would be time." His voice remained steady, but steadiness no longer felt like strength. "If I stay here, I'm just giving this place more time to become another thing I lose." Agnes sat opposite him. "Home is not the place where no one disappears," she said. "No place can promise that." The porch lamp cast amber light across the table. "Home is the place where someone still leaves the light on when you have not come back." Travis looked toward the window. The lamp had been burning before Drift found the cottage. Agnes had not known whether he would pass that way. She had simply chosen to make return possible. For years, Travis had believed belonging meant being certain no one could abandon him. Perhaps it meant trusting that someone would notice he was late. Before dawn, the storm weakened enough for county crews to reopen one route through town. Then the library alarm sounded. Travis reached the building with Drift, Malcolm, and a volunteer firefighter. Water poured beneath the basement archive door. A burst pipe had flooded the lower room, and the lights had failed. "Lenora went down 10 minutes ago," the librarian's assistant said. "She hasn't come back." Travis clipped a light to Drift's harness. "Find Lenora." Drift entered the dark stairwell. Water reached Travis's ankles at the bottom. Shelving cast black shapes across the room. Boxes floated open, releasing pages that spread across the water like pale leaves. Drift moved between the aisles, nose low. He stopped near the map drawers and barked once. Lenora lay beside an overturned cart, one leg trapped beneath it. Her plum-colored coat was soaked, and her hexagonal glasses had fallen several feet away. She was conscious, but shivering. "I was trying to move the county records," she said. "Of course you were," Travis replied. He lifted the cart while Malcolm pulled her free. Drift remained close to Lenora until they carried her upstairs. Naomi examined her and confirmed that nothing appeared broken, though hypothermia remained a concern. They saved several boxes. Many others dissolved into pulp. Malcolm stood in the flooded archive holding a printed maintenance notice. "The heat did not fail," he said. "Someone turned it off through the municipal control system." Eli examined the access log on the library computer. The account belongs to a former town administrator. "Retired 8 years ago," Lenora said through chattering teeth. A second document had arrived by email the previous evening, an authorization ordering selected financial archives transferred for scheduled destruction. The authorization was false, but it carried the correct municipal formatting and an electronic approval code. Malcolm no longer looked like a retired analyst reviewing an old mistake. He looked like a man recognizing a crime in progress. He removed his phone. "Who are you calling?" Travis asked. "Someone with authority to preserve what remains." Special Agent Dana Kersey arrived that afternoon in a dark government vehicle fitted with snow chains. She stepped into the library wearing a midnight blue parka over a charcoal suit, black hair tied low at her neck. At 44, Dana had the controlled posture of a person who allowed evidence to speak before emotion entered the room. A small recorder hung from a cord beneath her coat, and she removed her gloves before accepting any document. She listened to Malcolm's summary without interrupting. Then she looked at Travis. "I am not here to prove what happened to Edwin Whitcomb 30 years ago. I understand. I am here because someone interfered with public records, accessed a municipal system under false credentials, and may be using an emergency relief fund for political coercion." For the first time, the story no longer belonged only to people burdened by regret. Dana placed red clips on the documents requiring verification and sealed the electronic access logs in an evidence envelope. Outside, Ironwood Bend remained buried in white. Inside the library, dripping water marked the seconds as the past was lifted from private memory and placed into lawful hands. By the morning of the county hearing, every road into Ironwood Bend had been cleared. The snowbank still rose higher than truck hoods in places, but the sky had opened into a hard Wyoming blue. Sunlight flashed from courthouse windows and from the roofs surrounding the square, giving the town the bright, scrubbed appearance of somewhere hoping cleanliness might be mistaken for innocence. Travis arrived early with Drift. The hearing would take place in the County Civic Hall, a wide room usually reserved for livestock auctions, tax meetings, and wedding receptions, too large for the church basement. Folding chairs filled the floor. A raised table faced them beneath the county seal. Dana Kersey stood near the evidence desk, placing red clips on documents that remained under verification and blue clips on records cleared for public presentation. She had spent the previous week separating 3 matters that nearly everyone else wanted to combine. The county commissioners would consider the resort permits and disputed water rights. State and federal investigators would examine the relief fund, false electronic records, and interference with the library archive. The cooperative bank collapse would be reviewed as historical context and possible evidence of asset origins, not as though 3 decades had preserved every criminal charge intact. "Do not turn this into a trial," Dana told Travis. He wore a white Oxford shirt beneath a dark navy wool coat. His brown boots had been cleaned, but still bore scratches at the toes. He had left his hearing device visible rather than hiding it beneath his hair. "I know what kind of room this is. I know you've been in rooms where the loudest person controlled the outcome." Travis looked across the growing crowd. This town's had 30 years of that. Then don't help them repeat it. Drift sat close to Travis's left side, wearing only his olive tactical collar. No working harness. No beacon. Today, the dog's purpose was not to locate anyone or lead them through danger. He was there because Travis wanted him there. People entered in uneasy groups. Ranchers removed their hats but kept heavy coats on. Business owners whispered near the back wall. Several families who had received winter relief sat behind Gideon Rusk, their expressions defensive, before anyone had spoken. Gideon arrived without visible security. He wore a navy suit, dark green tie, and a long gray overcoat that an assistant took from him at the door. His silver hair remained perfectly parted. He greeted people by name, asked about livestock, and thanked county crews for clearing the pass. He looked neither frightened nor cornered. He looked like the mayor. When he approached Travis, Drift's ears rose. Gideon stopped at a respectful distance. "I regret that this has become so personal." Travis glanced toward the evidence table. "You built it out of people's lives. Personal seems accurate." Gideon sighed. "You think systems are created by villains. Most are created by frightened people trying to prevent collapse. That what you were doing?" "For a long time." The answer contained no denial. Before Travis could press further, Dana stepped between them. "Mr. Rusk, your counsel is waiting." Gideon nodded and moved away. The hearing began at 9. The county chairwoman opened with procedural language that sounded almost absurd beside the human weight in the room. The panel would determine whether Ironcrest Leisure Group had accurately represented its water assets, whether the proposed development posed material risk to existing agricultural users, and whether emergency relief contracts required temporary outside supervision. No one would be declared innocent or guilty that morning. Yet everyone present seemed to understand that judgment had already entered the room. Gideon's attorney spoke first. He described the resort as Ironwood Bend's best opportunity for jobs, tax revenue, medical access, and year-round economic stability. He presented photographs of abandoned storefronts, declining school enrollment from years before, and ranch properties sold to out-of-state buyers. Then Gideon addressed the commissioners himself. "The Winter Relief Fund has kept cattle alive through 9 major storms," he said. "It has supplied propane to isolated households, medicine to ranchers who could not afford veterinary emergencies, and fuel to county volunteers." He looked toward several families seated behind him. "I will not pretend every decision pleased everyone. Emergency management does not offer that luxury. But I reject the suggestion that every person helped by this system was purchased or manipulated." Several people nodded. Travis could not dismiss the argument. The fund had done good. The problem was not that every bale of hay had been poisoned by corruption. The problem was that useful things had taught people not to examine the hand distributing them. Gideon continued. "As for events 30 years ago, I was a junior employee following instructions during a financial crisis. The cooperative bank was failing. Depositors were panicking. Senior officers made decisions under conditions no one in this room can fully reconstruct." He did not mention Edwin, not yet. Dana called the present-day records first. Electronic access logs showed that a retired municipal administrator's credentials had been reactivated 2 days before the library's heating system was shut down. The same credentials authorized a false records destruction order. Payments from the Winter Relief Fund had gone to a feed supplier sharing a registered agent with a subsidiary of Ironcrest Leisure Group. The resort's financing application described the pledged water rights as unencumbered family assets, despite their documented passage through dissolved companies financed by cooperative bank loans. Gideon's attorney objected repeatedly, not to the existence of the records, but to the conclusions attached to them. Dana remained precise. "I am not asking this panel to determine criminal intent," she said. "I am establishing that the county relied on incomplete or inaccurate ownership representations when reviewing the project. The chairwoman looked toward Gideon. "Did you know the water rights originated with these entities?" "I knew they had passed through older agricultural holdings." That was not the question. For the first time, Gideon paused. "Yes?" The room shifted, not dramatically, no gasps, just coats rustling, boots adjusting, bodies leaning closer. Travis understood then that the truth rarely entered with thunder. Sometimes it arrived as a single word, finally stripped of explanation. Marlene testified next. She brought the red ledger from her warehouse and placed it on the table. Her faded green cap remained in her hands. "These are every bale, sack, fuel can, and veterinary shipment we distributed during the storm," she said. "Name, need, quantity, destination." The county attorney compared her list with the official relief records. Properties whose owners supported the resort had received earlier approval even when their reserves were larger. Several ranches that had questioned the project were categorized as pending verification until after roads closed. Gideon leaned toward his attorney. Marlene saw him. "You saved people with that fund," she said to him. "That's why this worked as long as it did. Folks were afraid asking questions might cost them the next winter." Her voice tightened. "Good deeds don't become worthless because someone used them badly, but they don't erase the using." Shop. Lenora followed. She wore a burgundy turtleneck beneath a long brown cardigan. Her hexagonal glasses caught the light as she looked at the commissioners. She did not begin with Gideon. She began with herself. "I signed reconciliation summaries at Ironwood Cooperative Bank without seeing all supporting records," she said. "I told myself senior employees had checked what I was not permitted to see. My totals balanced because the pages given to me were designed to balance." Her old signatures appeared on the screen behind her. Lenora did not turn away. She identified the shared mailing address, the 3 shell companies, and the internal forms used to transfer loan proceeds. She could not prove who physically entered every false number. She could prove the system required more than one person to stop asking. Malcolm presented the ownership chain. He spoke without drama, using dates, tax identities, registered agents, and successor entities. The companies had changed names, dissolved, merged, and transferred assets. The water rights had survived every transformation. "Corporations die more neatly than people," he said. "Their assets usually know where to go." A few uneasy laughs moved through the room. Then Eli Fenwick stood. His hands shook slightly when he opened his oxblood case. The missing water rights attachment had not been found in the county archive. It had been located in a legal storage file tied to the Boone estate, separated from the main deed during an earlier refinancing. Eli admitted that his former firm had processed one of the later trust transfers. "I did not create the original arrangement," he said, "but I treated each document as isolated paperwork. I did not ask why an agricultural trust with no livestock held senior diversion rights across working ranches." "Was that illegal?" Gideon's attorney asked. "Not by itself." "Then what are you confessing to?" Eli looked toward Travis. "Professional comfort." The attorney frowned. "I beg your pardon?" "I am confessing that procedure became a convenient substitute for judgment." When Travis's name was called, the room felt warmer than before. He walked to the witness table with Walt's letter in one hand. Drift remained beside Agnes near the aisle. Travis looked first at the commissioners, then at the ranchers from the northern valley. Men and women whose water rights might conflict with Boone Ranch. Families whose losses could trace back to the same money that had once saved his childhood home. He could protect Walt's reputation. He could describe the old man as confused, sick, or uncertain. He could argue that the loan extension was merely one transaction among hundreds. Instead, he unfolded the letter. My grandfather believed the Boone Ranch extension came from a legitimate relief program, Travis said. Later, he found records suggesting the money may have moved through accounts connected to the missing deposits. Gideon's attorney rose. Mr. Boone, this letter is not proof of the source. No. Your grandfather was speculating. Yes. So why present it? Travis looked at Walt's handwriting. Because he benefited from the system and stayed quiet after he knew enough to question it. The attorney paused. The admission did not serve the defense or prosecution neatly. That was why it mattered. Travis continued. If Boone Ranch received value it was not entitled to, the estate should be reviewed. If land or money must be returned, then it should be returned. Murmurs spread through the hall. Marlene turned toward him sharply. The ranch was not only property, it was collateral, history, and the stable address required for Drift's adoption. Travis understood all of that. He also understood that truth offered no guarantee it would leave him with what he wanted. Gideon watched him from across the room. For the first time, the mayor's practiced expression failed. "You would sacrifice the ranch for this?" he asked before his attorney could stop him. Travis faced him. "No, I would stop using the ranch as a reason to sacrifice someone else." The room went silent. That silence belonged to no one person. It belonged to every excuse that had once sounded reasonable. Agnes testified last. She wore the faded navy cardigan with the patched elbow and the silver pine branch brooch at her collar. She walked with her ashwood cane but refused the arm offered by a court attendant. Drift rose when she passed and settled again after she sat. Agnes did not tell the commissioners Edwin had been flawless. He was proud, she said. He believed too much in institutions because he had spent his life helping neighbors understand them. He could be impatient. He kept work from me because he thought worry was something husbands should prevent rather than share. Her mouth softened briefly. But the records show what they show. A forensic document examiner retained by Dana had concluded that the signature on the accusation letter had been assembled from portions of Edwin's authentic signatures. No original signed version had been found. Bank records showed no money entering accounts controlled by Edwin or Agnes. Corporate records linked loan proceeds to shell companies that acquired water assets. Those assets remained under the control of successors connected to Gideon's development network. Agnes folded her hands. "I am not asking you to declare my husband a saint. I am asking you to stop calling him a thief when the evidence does not support it." Gideon stood unexpectedly. His attorney whispered to him, but he continued. "I was 29, he said. The room turned. "My superiors told me the bank would close by Monday unless the book showed liquidity. Farmers would lose credit lines. Payrolls would fail. Depositors would empty what remained." He looked toward Agnes. "I changed entries because I believed we needed time." "And Edwin?" she asked. Gideon's face tightened. "Edwin discovered inconsistencies." "So you used his name?" "At first only to redirect the review." "Until when?" Gideon looked across the room at the people who had trusted him for decades. "Until it became safer not to correct it." There it was, not a single monstrous decision, but a staircase built from smaller ones. He had altered numbers to delay collapse, allowed suspicion to settle on a dead man, used hidden assets to strengthen his influence, then convinced himself that every winter he helped the town proved the original lie had become necessary. The commissioners recessed for 2 hours. When they returned, the county chairwoman read the orders carefully. The Iron Crest Resort application was suspended. All transfers involving the disputed water rights were frozen pending ownership review. The Winter Relief Fund would enter temporary independent supervision. The panel referred evidence of false representations and interference with public records to state and federal authorities. It did not declare Edwin legally exonerated in a criminal trial. It did not sentence Gideon. It did not erase 30 years. Dana approached Gideon after the hearing adjourned. 2 federal agents stood behind her. She informed him that he was under arrest on allegations involving wire fraud, false statements, obstruction, misuse of relief funds, and tampering with current public records. Gideon did not resist. He removed the Silver Mountain tie clip and placed it on the table before offering his hands. As the agents led him toward the door, several people stood, not in respect, not in celebration. They simply moved aside. No one cheered. One rancher whose cattle had survived because of Gideon's fund began to cry. Another man stared at the floor. A woman near the back whispered that the mayor had once paid for her furnace repair. All of it could be true. That was the terrible part. A man could save one family in winter and still build his power on another family's ruin. Travis remained beside the witness table. Drift came to his left side. Across the room, Agnes looked at the empty chair where Gideon had been sitting. The town had spent decades believing one guilty man had harmed them. Now they faced a harder truth. A lie that lasted 30 years required more than the person who began it. It required people who benefited, people who feared the cost of asking, and people who mistook silence for peace. Outside, sunlight shone across the snow. Nothing in Ironwood Bend looked different. But for the first time, no one inside the hall could pretend the past had stayed behind them. By the final week of February, the snow had begun to change. It no longer fell with the hard, blinding force that erased roads and turned fence lines into guesses. The drifts still stood deep along the northern fields, but sunlight softened their edges. Water ticked from the barn roof at midday and froze again before dusk. Ironwood Bend was not healed. It was thawing. The administrative report arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dana brought copies to Agnes's cottage rather than summoning everyone to the county office. She placed the documents on the kitchen table, removed her gloves, and waited until Agnes had read the first page herself. The report did not use the word innocent. Government language rarely carried words that clean. It stated that investigators had found no evidence Edwin Whitcomb received, controlled, or benefited from the missing cooperative bank funds. The transfer letter bearing his signature had been assembled from copied samples. The financial trail led instead through shell companies, land acquisitions, and water assets controlled by others. The county historical record would be corrected. The local museum display would be revised. The archived newspaper index would no longer list Edwin as the presumed architect of the bank collapse. Agnes read each line without expression. Travis sat across from her. Drift lay near the stove, one dark ear angled toward the paper whenever it shifted in her hands. Dana waited. At last Agnes lowered the report. So they have decided he did not steal what he never had. That is the finding, Dana said. 30 years late. Yes. Agnes looked toward the window. There was no triumph in her face, only fatigue and something quieter. The grief of receiving justice after the person most in need of it could no longer hear his name spoken correctly. What happens to Gideon? Travis asked. The current criminal case proceeds separately. Some older conduct may be used to establish origin, intent, or pattern, but several historical offenses are beyond limitation periods. And the families who lost money? Dana opened another file. The recovery would not resemble repayment in full. Too much time had passed. Some records were incomplete. Some victims had died without heirs who could establish claims. Some assets had been sold, merged, or leveraged beyond their original value. Still, a community recovery fund had been approved. Its money would come from frozen development assets, recovered proceeds tied to disputed water transactions, a civil settlement with the bank's successor institution, liability coverage, and a county contribution. Verified claimants and lawful heirs would receive proportional compensation. No one would receive everything. "That sounds like a polite way of saying people remain cheated," Travis said. Dana met his eyes. "It means the law can recover assets. It cannot return 30 years. Agnes closed the report. "Then we should stop asking it to perform miracles and make sure it does the work it can." The public acknowledgement took place the following Saturday in the town square. The county had suggested the Civic Hall, but Agnes refused. "If the town wishes to speak," she said, "it can do so where it spent years looking away." A simple platform stood near the public water spigot. Snow had been cleared from the wooden walkway, though ice still gleamed between the boards. No flags covered the storefronts. No band played. Agnes had rejected a ceremonial banner with the words, "Restoring Honor," because, as she told the mayor pro tempore, honor is not a tablecloth one puts back after spilling something. Nearly 200 people came. Some stood near the front. Others remained at the edges of the square, as though distance might protect them from participation. A few business owners closed their shops. Several did not. Travis stood beside Agnes, wearing his tobacco-brown canvas coat over a dark green flannel shirt. Drift remained at his left leg. Caleb Dern waited near the old water spigot. He had shaved the heavy edges of his beard and wore a clean brick-red flannel beneath his work coat. His steel-toed boots still carried grease in the seams. In his hands was a new galvanized water bucket. When the county official finished reading the corrected findings, no one applauded. Caleb stepped forward first. He placed the bucket beneath the spigot, but did not turn the handle. "My parents lost their savings," he said. "My father lost the ranch. My mother kept every bank letter until she died because she thought one of them might explain why." His voice roughened, but he did not look away from Agnes. "I believed your husband did that to them. Then I decided believing it gave me the right to punish you." Agnes stood quietly. Caleb swallowed. "I won't ask you to forget what I did. I won't ask you to tell me my anger made sense." He looked down at the bucket. "I aimed it at the wrong person." It was not a graceful apology. That made it sound true. Agnes nodded once. Caleb turned the spigot. Clear water struck the bottom of the bucket. Then Marlene came forward with the unopened wrapping from Walt's final tea shipment folded in her hand. "The walk from my store to Agnes's house takes 11 minutes, she said. "I timed it yesterday." A few people shifted. "I kept that tea 3 weeks. I told myself I was busy. I told myself Walt had died and the order no longer mattered. The truth is, I did not want anyone to see me carrying it." Marlene looked at Agnes. "I was not cruel to you. I used that as proof I was decent." Her voice faltered. "But I let cruelty do its work because opposing it would have made my life inconvenient." Lenora spoke next. She did not repeat the technical details of the bank ledgers. She simply held up one photocopied balance sheet with her younger signature at the bottom. "I signed numbers I had not been allowed to understand," she said. "Then I spent years preserving records because it felt safer than admitting I had once helped make a false record look complete." Eli stood with his hands outside his coat pockets, denying himself the familiar refuge of paper. He acknowledged the legal transfers his former firm had processed and the questions he had failed to ask. Others followed. Not everyone apologized. One rancher said the findings changed nothing about the land his family had lost. A woman near the bakery insisted Agnes must have known more than she admitted. 2 men left before the statements ended. Travis watched them go. No one tried to stop them. Truth did not require unanimous attendance. When Agnes finally approached the platform, she used her ashwood cane but declined Travis's arm. The square grew quiet. "I have heard many people ask for forgiveness this morning," she said. "Some have earned the right to ask. Some have only now learned that asking is different from receiving." No one moved. "I do not know whether I have forgiven this town." Her voice remained steady. "But I agree to let it begin repairing what it can." She held up 3 fingers. First, Edwin Whitcomb's name will be corrected in every public record controlled by this town. A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Second, every dollar entering or leaving the Winter Relief Fund will be available for public review. Marlene nodded. Third, the old cooperative bank building will become a free financial guidance center for older residents, ranch families, and anyone asked to sign papers they do not understand. Agnes lowered her hand. If Ironwood Bend wants an apology that lasts longer than this morning, build that. The town council approved the plan within 2 weeks, not without argument. Not without. The bank's former lobby required repairs. The roof leaked near the rear office. The plumbing had not survived the winter intact. Caleb volunteered his shop to rebuild the water pump and heating controls. He never called the work an apology, but he arrived before sunrise and stayed until the pipes ran clear. Marlene accepted temporary responsibility for the relief warehouse under a new public ledger system. Every delivery was posted in the library and online. Lenora began designing an archive room for the new center. She included Edwin's corrected file, Walt's unfinished notes, her own signed balance sheets, and the history of Gideon's shell companies. Travis asked whether Walt's letter had to be included. Yes, Lenora said. He tried to correct what he did. He also waited. Travis looked at the copy in her gloved hands. Then include both. Spring was still weeks away when Eli completed the preliminary review of Boone Ranch. The estate might owe restitution if investigators established that the old loan extension had come directly from misappropriated funds. But no immediate seizure was ordered. Travis could continue managing the ranch while the civil review proceeded. He enrolled in a veteran agricultural recovery program that paired former service members with experienced ranch operators. Marlene agreed to mentor him, though she objected to the word. "I am not mentoring you," she said. "I am preventing you from killing cattle through optimism." Travis committed to keeping the ranch for 1 year, not forever. 1 calving season, 1 summer of irrigation, 1 autumn of preparing hay, 1 full winter in a place he could leave after learning what staying required. The decision felt more honest than a vow. Naomi arrived on a bright morning with Drift's final placement papers. She examined the dog's hip, checked his weight, and reviewed Travis's housing plan, veterinary schedule, emergency contacts, and intended workload. Then she placed the adoption agreement on Walt's kitchen table. The review board approved the transfer. Travis looked at Drift. The German shepherd sat in a patch of sunlight near the window, the narrow gold stripe along his back almost glowing against the black saddle. "Officially?" Travis asked. "Officially, he is no longer on conditional placement." Naomi handed him the pen. "You are responsible for his retirement, medical care, exercise, bad habits, and all future incidents involving stolen tea tins." That last part wasn't in the form. It should have been. Travis signed. Caleb later made Drift a dark brown leather collar with a brass plate. Drift on the reverse. Boone Ranch. Ironwood Bend. Travis ran his thumb over the words longer than necessary. Property had never meant much to him. Belonging did. The Thursday after the public gathering, Travis brought tea to Agnes as usual. No officials came, no one carried reports. There were no microphones, folding chairs, or corrected plaques. Only a kettle warming on the stove. Drift settled beside the hearth while Agnes opened a cupboard and removed a white porcelain cup edged in cobalt blue. Travis had seen it before, but never used it. She placed it in front of him. "That was Walt's." "I know. I kept it because throwing it away would have been too final." Travis touched the handle. Agnes poured the tea. "Your grandfather spent 30 years trying to keep a promise he had been too afraid to speak aloud," she said. "He thought returning every Thursday might someday become the same thing as standing beside me when it mattered. Travis lowered his eyes. It wasn't. No, the answer came gently. But neither was it nothing. She sat opposite him. You did not finish Walt's work, Travis. He looked up. You did something different. What? You made me believe there could still be someone worth waiting for. For once, Travis had no defense ready. Drift lifted his head, checked both of them, then returned to sleep. Agnes added sugar to her tea. Travis noticed she had placed none near his cup. You remembered. You complained for 6 weeks that I was trying to poison you. 2 spoons is not tea. It is syrup with ambitions. Agnes smiled. Their laughter did not erase Walt, Edwin, or the lost years. It simply occupied the room with something that had not been there before. Life continued in smaller choices. Travis repaired the north fence rather than replacing it all at once. Agnes allowed him to clear her roof but refused to let him reorganize the pantry. Caleb began leaving repair invoices at the new center marked Community Credit. Lenora corrected the archive one label at a time. Some Thursdays, Agnes and Travis spoke for hours. Some Thursdays, they argued. Some Thursdays, neither found anything worth saying. They no longer mistook silence for absence. One Thursday morning, fresh snow covered Ironwood Bend beneath a clear sky. Travis drove from the ranch with tea on the passenger seat and warm cornbread wrapped in a towel. Drift rode behind him wearing the new collar, his muzzle resting between the front seats. Agnes's amber porch lamp still burned, though daylight had arrived. When the truck stopped, Drift jumped down and ran ahead. For months he had waited outside her door until she opened it. He had guarded the threshold, making certain she was safe before leaving. This time the door stood slightly open. Drift pushed it wider with his nose and walked inside. From the kitchen, Agnes called, "The tea is getting cold." Travis climbed the steps. The public square had given Agnes back her name. The report had corrected Edwin's record. The law had placed Gideon's choices into the hands of a court. None of those things had taught Travis how to come home. That lesson had arrived more quietly. In a porch light, left burning. In a dog who no longer waited for permission to enter. In an old woman complaining that he was late while setting out 2 cups. Travis crossed the threshold and closed the door against the cold. For the first time since leaving the Navy, he did not feel that he had entered someone else's house. He had come home. Sometimes the hardest inheritance is not land, money, or a family name. It is the unfinished courage of those who came before us. Travis could not undo Walt's silence, but he could choose not to repeat it. And perhaps that is where grace begins, not in changing the past, but in refusing to let its failures decide who we become. In our own lives, may we have the courage to ask one more question, stand beside the person others avoid, and leave a light on for someone still trying to find their way home. Tell us in the comments which choice in this story stayed with you most. And if you believe stories of loyalty, truth, and second chances still matter, please subscribe and join us for the next one. May God give you wisdom when the truth is difficult, courage when doing right has a cost, and peace in the place you call home.